Maduro, it appears, addressing the court directly. It is translated, saying he has the indictment in his hands for the first time, saying he would rather read it personally, Laura.
Yeah, and perhaps that's because he knows that all eyes are on this courtroom in Lower Manhattan right now, and making clear that, you know, a position of I'm not going to be sort of bullied around in this case. He says, I am the president of Venezuela. I was captured at my home in Caracas. Again, knowing all of the eyes on this right now, Hallie, interesting to see what the first words are from Nicolas Maduro. We heard, you know, just brief utterances from him over the weekend, I believe saying Happy New Year when we saw him, just in those brief moments over the weekend after he was brought to the United States. But this is certainly the most lengthy statement we've heard for him. And the judge also saying to him if he can't afford an attorney, that he's entitled to one. And that he will be released prior to trial unless I find reasons to hold you. Obviously, the government in this case is going to mount a vigorous effort to hold him. There's not a chance that the Justice Department is going to want to release him prior to trial. But again, this is the type of arguments that you're going to see mounted.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. This is Justin Paul. So I'm doing reaction here to several clips from first-hand accounts of what's going on inside the courtroom for Nicolas Maduro. Of course, you know, if you've been living under a rock, you know that there was a U.S. operation in Venezuela to go in and capture Maduro and his wife and extradite them over here to the United States in order to, you know, answer to, you know, the felony charges or fugitive charges that they have, and they're currently in New York City, and you know, this has been all over the news, so I'd be surprised if you haven't heard of what's going on here. But just reacting to some of the first reactions to their first appearance in court, and just you know, trying to key in on a few things and try to get an understanding because there's no cameras within the courtrooms.
Danny, let me go to Danny for a second, Laura, and I'm going to let you read in on these notes because Danny, Maduro is addressing the court now. As the judge is reading him the variety of rights that he has, Maduro is saying, I did not know of these rights. Your Honor has informed them of me now. Remarkable, Danny, when you think about the last 48 hours for Nicolas Maduro, who was leading Venezuela up until about 2 days ago, who has been extracted in a large-scale military operation by the United States to face this American federal judge in New York. All of it very intentional. He just also pled not guilty. So, Danny and Laura, a significant moment here. The leader of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, here in the United States to face those charges, pleading not guilty in this Manhattan court, telling a judge, I am the president of my country.
Yeah, so definitely, you know, going to be defiant. You know, I wouldn't expect him to enter in a guilty plea. And, you know, he still stands on the stance that he is the president of Venezuela. So, you know, even though there's been reports that the election was rigged and, you know, that he assumed power with force, you know, it's no different than anyone that comes, you know, in the courts and are charged. You know, they're going to use the fact that they're able to plead not guilty and, you know, put it on the U.S. justice system to prove that they are guilty. And this is a reaction to the First Lady of Venezuela.
The attention inside court has now turned to Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, who is also being indicted here by the U.S. Department of Justice. She is an influential figure in Venezuela and has been in her own right, the former attorney general in that country. She's been accused in this indictment of working alongside her husband to partner in this massive drug trafficking alleged conspiracy, this narco trafficking conspiracy, accused on her own of accepting bribes, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth as part of that as well. And Laura, she is now addressing the court.
Hallie, and similarly, she is saying, I am the First Lady of Venezuela, again, trying to position herself still in power, still in a position of strength and authority. She was asked to stand by the judge. He said to her, you heard my summary of the indictment. She said her attorney received it. She heard the summary. She acknowledged that her attorneys are here by her side, and the judge, again, going through sort of the routine statements of, you know, if you can't afford an attorney, the court will provide one. How do you plead to the counts? And she has pleaded, as did her husband, Hallie, not guilty. She's saying completely innocent.
I'll tell you what, you know, of course, this is going to be like on every major news network, whether they're for it, whether they're against it. They're going to cover this because it's such a huge story, and nothing unexpected here. Neither one is going to plead guilty to these charges, and again, they're going to put it on the justice system to prove that they are guilty of the charges that's being, you know, brought forth, which are you know, drug charges and um, you know, taking bribes, and we know we really understand from that presidential press conference that, you know, we went in there, we wanted to take over the oil industry over in Venezuela. We want to install leadership there that's going to work with the United States and not necessarily against countries that are against the United States, like China and Russia. Even though we play real nice with them, they would definitely love to be in our position as far as a world superpower. So, you know, anyone who really pays attention to geopolitics, you pretty much understand that point. And then anyone that pays attention to like our oil consumption, energy consumption, you know that Venezuela was one of the key pieces that, you know, the president wanted to take in order to, you know, bolster that. And as he was saying, you know, all the big companies here in the United States are going to go over there and invest, you know, billions of dollars into, you know, getting their natural resource and that oil, and, you know, we become the sellers. So really strategic move. I feel like he was trying to, you know, put us in a position to where people like countries like China and, you know, Russia or any other country that's buying oil from Venezuela will have to deal with us as well. And that can also either help or hurt like certain negotiations that we have with these countries, and certain, like, you know, political issues that we have, or any tensions that we have with these countries as well. Because, you know, those oil tankers that we seized, they were definitely, you know, supposedly on their way to China. Let's see what else we have here.
I want to bring in MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. She just got out of the courtroom and joins us now. Lisa, what are your takeaways? And can you take us into that room? There were no electronic devices, and so you're our conduit.
No. Allie, I'm going to do the best I can to tell you about this from start to finish, but let's start at the end first and work backwards, because that's where the real fireworks happen. As Nicolas Maduro, who was wearing an orange sort of mid-sleeve T-shirt underneath a navy V-neck shirt, you could see the hems of his prison garb orange T-shirt coming out his sleeves and out his hem. As he stood up wearing translation headphones in order to make his exit from the courtroom, a gentleman sitting in about the third or fourth row to my left suddenly stood up and jabbed a finger at him and said what our producer Guerrero says in Spanish was, "You will pay," at which point Maduro calmly looked at him and said, "Soy hombre de Dios," meaning I am a man of God, and then said, "Soy prisionera de la guerra," I am a prisoner of war. And the exchange between...
So she's describing a tense interaction in a courtroom where a gentleman stood up and basically told Maduro that he's going to pay, and Maduro responded, you know, "I'm a man of God," and you know, he said he's a prisoner of war. So of course he at certain parts of Venezuela, he's still going to have a base. He's still going to have people who support him. And what they want to see is that their leader is still strong, even with all this that happened. And that's going to keep them on his side. So, you know, I don't expect anything less from someone who was the leader of a full country. I don't expect him to cower out or to, you know, act shameful or anything like that. I expect for him to, you know, be the same person that we seen dancing in the videos when, you know, the threat of the United States coming and doing what they did, which was extradite him over here to face these charges, he was dancing and living it up, and really didn't, take it any of the warnings that the United States gave him or threats. He really didn't seem like he was taking them serious, and I feel like that's one of the reasons they went ahead and went through with the operation to bring him over here.
Between them started to continue until a court officer who had already warned everyone before the proceedings started that if you were to make a statement, you would be immediately ejected, looked at the guy who was wearing a suit, seemed like any other employee of the government who might have come to watch. And indeed, there were scores of people from the DEA, from the Department of Homeland Security. At that point, the court security officer jabbed his finger at the guy and said, "You out." And that all happened as Judge Hellerstein stood up from the bench, which means everybody in the courtroom was standing at the same time as law enforcement officers were trying to get this gentleman who was trying to force a confrontation with Nicolas Maduro out of the courtroom, as Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores de Maduro, were trying to get back into U.S. custody. Let me tell you some other things that happened that I think are interesting.
Yeah.
Cilia Flores' lawyer said that during the kidnapping, what they called the kidnapping, Cilia Flores sustained serious injuries, and you could see some bruising to her forehead. They said she also sustained what they believe might be some fracturing of her ribs. They asked that she get immediate medical attention, and of course, Judge Hellerstein said that that could be worked out with the government. But then let's go back to the beginning, Allie. This was unlike anything I have ever seen. I've never seen a head of state in a U.S. courtroom before as a defendant. And Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, had to have been humbled by this. They walked in, again, wearing standard issue prison garb. Nicolas Maduro wearing khakis on the bottom, but that standard issue orange prison t-shirt on the top. When he was asked to enter his plea, he tried to give a pretty long recitation. First, the judge asked him, "Are you in fact Nicolas Maduro de Moros?" And he said, "I am Nicolas Maduro de Moros. I am the president of Venezuela. I am here because I had been kidnapped since Saturday, January 3rd. They captured me at my home in Caracas," at which point Judge Alvin Hellerstein, who is presiding over this case, cut him off and said, "Mr. Maduro, there will be time to address all of this, including through motion practice that your lawyers will bring. I just want you to confirm that you are Nicolas Maduro de Moros." And there were other instances in which both Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, attempted to have their say in court.
Yeah, they want to go ahead and speak their piece. They don't know when. At that point, they don't know when their next court date is. I'm sure they know now, but of course they want to just go ahead and get their statements out. And of course, it's going to be a trial to where they'll be able to do that if they please. One thing I've been noticing though is just like with all the overhead coverage of how they're transporting and moving Maduro, that everyone's gonna be able to watch that and kind of see, how many people are on detail. I know when he was coming into the country, it was hundreds of agents that was around him and accompanying him to where they was transporting him to. But now they have the location of where he's located. I'm sure he's under 24/7 surveillance, him and his wife. But again, I feel like this is why they went ahead and did the operation without approval from Congress or anything, because a lot of stuff gets leaked. A lot of the media has helicopters and things like that to where they pretty much give up any secrets, like how many people are in the detail, the type of vehicles that they're using, whether they're armored, whether they're not. I mean, everything is really shown, and it's not a secret.
Being said, there was some real disjuncture between Nicolas Maduro, the defendant, who said, for example, when Judge Hellerstein read him his rights, the right to remain silent, that he's entitled to counsel, that he's entitled to be free pending trial unless Judge Hellerstein finds that he's a danger to the community. He asked him, "Are you aware of these rights? Have you discussed them with your lawyer?" And he said, again, in Spanish, this is the translation, "I did not know of these rights. You, Your Honor, are informing me of them now." And yet, as inexperienced as he was, or claimed to have been, with the American justice system, he comported himself as if he were still the head of state of Venezuela. Put aside what he was wearing, put aside that he is wearing the bulky translation headphones. In his comportment, he was carrying himself as if he continued to believe that he is the president of Venezuela. And that disjuncture, Ali, was really jarring for me and others in the courtroom to witness today.
Again, it's going to be defiant because he was the leader of a country.
I want to go now to Sam Brock, who was inside that courtroom for those historic moments as Nicolas Maduro and his wife were arraigned on American soil. Sam, tell us what it was like inside that room.
Hallie, one of the most remarkable arraignments you could ever imagine, right? You've covered court cases throughout the course of your career. You're hard-pressed to remember anything like this. So Nicolas Maduro walks into the courtroom with his wife, Celia Flores, right around noon. And immediately, so first of all, he is wearing orange garb from the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, a black shirt over that. Hard to tell, Hallie, whether or not he was handcuffed or not when he first walked in, but he is right away shaking hands with all of his attorneys. He nods at the people in the gallery, both on the side where the public was seated as well as the journalists. It almost looked like at one point he cracked a smile, was greeting his attorneys, getting situated. His wife came in as well, Celia Flores, I might add. It was hard to tell at first, but then this was brought up by their attorneys, had bandages on her face and had bruising around her eyes. They discussed the fact that she was injured during detention and even mentioned possible fractures to her back or other parts of her body when the question around medical attention came up. So we'll get back to that in a second. But when I say remarkable, so they come in, Maduro has 4 U.S. Marshals behind him. They sit directly behind Maduro. While he is seated then and facing the judge, Judge Hellerstein addresses the court. He proceeds to read the charges, certainly the narco-terrorism, the cocaine importation conspiracy, the weapons-related charges, gets through all of that, and then says to Nicolas Maduro, "Are you Nicolas Maduro?" And he says, Hallie, first, "I am Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela. I am president of the Republic of Venezuela. I have been kidnapped since January 3rd. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela," which at that point, Hallie, the judge steps in and says, "Wait a minute. We're going to get to all of that. I just want to know if you're Nicolas Maduro."
Interesting.
And he says, "Yes, I am." And in fact, he's wearing headphones the entire time, right? Because he's hearing the interpretation, the translation. He actually interrupts the translator as she's trying to articulate to the judge and to the court what Maduro is saying. He's so eager to sort of state his case. So again, this was very anomalous in terms of what happens in what are normally perfunctory arraignments and hearings. So they go through that. The judge reads through the charges, okay? Then he asks him whether or not he's seen the indictment. And Maduro and his attorney, Barry Pollock, who, by the way, represented Julian Assange, well known in the field of criminal defense. He's also known for negotiating a plea agreement to get Assange out of jail, also represented one of the Enron executives who was fully acquitted on criminal fraud charges. He's representing Maduro in this case, and he said, "I have briefed my client, but he hasn't actually read the indictment." And so then the judge says, do you want the court to read the indictment? Maduro says, "No, I don't, but he does want to have consultation on it." The entire time this is going on, both Maduro and Flores are taking just scrupulous notes. I mean, you could see their notepads when they stood up at the end of the court proceeding, just filled with information. Maduro wanted to make sure that the court knew those were his notes. He's entitled to them. Am I allowed to keep them? The judge said, "Sure, you can keep the notes." So this all goes on. And then the judge asks Maduro whether or not he has been briefed on his rights. And by rights, not just to counsel, but also to silence. And when that exchange goes back and forth again with the translator, he says, "This is the first I've been told of that." It's not clear whether or not Maduro was referring to whether or not he has to speak with police and law enforcement, or whether it was right to counsel, or what aspect of his rights he was just being informed about for the first time. That was a very interesting interaction as well. And of course, the pleas, right? So we get to the pleas.
And of course, we know, they pleaded not guilty. People, these people, man, like, y'all don't have work to go do. Y'all don't have a job or anything like that. No U.S. war in Venezuela. That's not going to be a war. That would be dumb for it to even be a war when the two people that they were looking to get, they already have them in a courtroom. So, that would be very idiotic to start a war. I mean, they've already shown you the capabilities that we possess as far as military. You guys, the Venezuelan military doesn't have the capabilities that the United States has. And of course, like President Trump was saying in that press conference, wait, ready for a second phase if need be. So, do I think there'll be a war? No. I mean, they've already shown that they're going to make peace. There's going to be someone that we put in, typically a puppet candidate, that's going to play nice with the United States, and yeah, I mean, that's just how. This is what Russia wanted to do with Ukraine. This is exactly what Russia wanted to do with Ukraine. It's just that they just wasn't capable of doing that. But United States military, as we just showed, we're capable of doing a lot of stuff, and it's gonna be people for it, against it. That's gonna be my next video, where I'm showing people protesting all across the United States about what happened. But I just don't feel like those people truly understand really what's going on, and people always just look for a reason to protest. And my thing is, man, how you called out of work to go protest, or do you just not have a job? Because how do you have time to stand outside for hours holding up signs talking about no war when it's not a war? We went in with an operation, did what we had to do, got up out of there. A war, we would still be over there, raining bullets and bombs right now. But how can y'all afford to be standing outside with these signs and stuff like that, then crying that you don't have no jobs and that the economy is bad? It's because you spend your time protesting and throwing up signs with messages that are of stuff that's not going to take place. I'm going to close out this video though and get into my next one. If you like my content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. This is Justin Paul. Peace.